Good evening. If you would like to include closed captioning to this presentation, please click the three dots found at the top of the right toolbar. In the drop-down menu, select Turn on Live Captions. Welcome to Southern California Edison's Wildfire Safety Community Livestream meeting for Riverside County. My name is Jeremy Goldman, and I'm a Government Relations Manager with SCE supporting Riverside County. We greatly appreciate that you took the time to participate this evening, as well as submitting your questions when you registered for the meeting. I'd also like to thank Riverside County, as well as our state and federal elected officials and their staff for joining us tonight. We appreciate that you always have open lines of communication and look forward to our ongoing partnership. Let me start by saying that we recognize how important it is for you and your families to have electricity, especially during a pandemic when many of you are working and learning from home. Our company is focused on safely providing reliable service to our customers and communities. Our number one priority remains public safety. As California prepares for the upcoming wildfire season, we want to provide you with the latest information on how we're preparing and what you can do to be prepared. During the most recent wildfire season, we implemented public safety power shutoffs, or PSPS, to reduce the threat of wildfires. We know you may have experienced PSPS events. We know that these outages are painful and heard your concerns. We are committed to reducing the need of PSPS outages and will be sharing more information during our presentation. Please know, if you get disconnected or if you need to drop off early, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website at sce.com/wildfire. Next slide, please. As always, your feedback is extremely important to us and we encourage you to submit questions. Because we have a large number of attendees tonight, we'll be taking questions through the Q&A window. You should be able to see the window on your right-hand side. We ask that you please ask questions that are relevant to the topic and the material being presented. We will do our very best to answer as many questions as possible in the allotted time. Next slide, please. I am joined tonight by the following presenters. We have Mark Bassett, Emergency Service Manager with Riverside County. He's going to share an update on wildfire safety. Paul Gregot, Vice President of Distribution, who will share our wildfire mitigation and PSPS action plans. Cameron McPherson, Senior Manager of Wildfire Safety, who will share our efforts to reduce the need for PSPS. Katie Sloan, Vice President of Customer Programs and Services, who will share information on our customer care and community engagement efforts. Next slide, please. We plan to cover these topics as part of our presentation: the 2021 wildfire season, SCE's wildfire mitigation activities, public safety power shutoffs, reducing the need for PSPS, PSPS communications, customer programs and resources, and again, at the end, we'll have Q&A. Next slide, please. Following our presentation, we will then open it up for Q&A to answer the questions. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mark Bassett with the county to provide some updated information specific on emergency preparedness. Over to you, Mark. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, everybody, for being on, and thank you to Southern California Edison for inviting us to speak tonight. You know, it says on the slide there, an emergency can happen at any time. Typically, emergency events, we don't get very much notice as far as adequate notice to get out of the harm's way. In Riverside County, we experience wildfires, flooding, damaging winds, hazardous material incidents, and of course, we are prone for earthquakes with the southernmost portion of the San Andreas Fault near the Salton Sea, which is slated to go off one day, which will produce a 7.8 or greater earthquake. But tonight we're here to talk about wildland fires, which can happen so fast that by the time you get notice to evacuate, there is barely enough time to get out of harm's way. We saw that last night in Laguna Beach. That fire roared up the hill toward those homes, and
So, can you hear me? So it looks like Mark has frozen. So we'll get back to Mark at the end. But now let's turn it over to Paul Gregot to provide an overview of SCE's wildfire mitigation activities and PSPS. Paul, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. And thanks, Mark. I bet you probably can't hear me at this point, but appreciated him joining us this evening, and I think he will be around for the Q&A a little bit later. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to engage him a little bit later. Good evening, everybody. I also wanted to express my sincere appreciation for your participation tonight and engagement and in joining us today on this very important topic. We have a lot of information to share this evening with you, and we look forward to your questions. And again, please do post them throughout the presentation, and we will address them at the conclusion of our remarks. Our conversation tonight is really about the wildfire safety overall, and will include updates on our continued improvements on our public safety power shutoff program, otherwise known as PSPS. Last year, again, California experienced another year of extreme wildfire activity. With the ongoing intensifying drought, we're seeing that there is really no longer a fire season. Fueled by dry vegetation and strong winds, wildfire poses a threat to our communities year-round. In fact, 6 of the 7 largest wildfires in California all happened in the past 2 years. And nearly all of the top 20 largest wildfires shown here in California happened since 2000. These statistics highlight the need for all of us to stay focused on our efforts to reduce wildfire risk and mitigate the impacts. Next slide, please. So at Southern California Edison, we are dedicated to the safety of our customers and the communities we serve and live in for many of us. Over the past several years, since 2018, we've been making improvements to make our electric grid more resilient in high fire risk areas. Our detailed plan is in fact outlined in our annual wildfire mitigation plan, which is posted on our website. The most recent 2022 plan was filed earlier this year on February 18th. To give you an overview of the suite of mitigations we've implemented in our high fire risk communities, let's focus our attention on this particular slide. Starting to the right, you can see we're hardening our electrical system in many ways, such as replacing bare wire with insulated wire, otherwise known as covered conductor. It is one of the most effective measures to prevent potential sparking from objects that can fly into the power line, such as vegetation and tarp and a variety of other foreign objects that tend to fly around during high winds. We will show a video a little bit later here following this slide, in fact, for a glimpse into the work of our crews. We're also installing fire-resistant poles and cross arms, fast-acting fuses that enable us to isolate, if you will, or de-energize a specific section of line before a spark is created. And we also have sectionalizing devices that we've installed out there that better enable us to isolate a portion of the circuit that is probably more exposed than other portions. And we're also pursuing undergrounding in targeted areas. Here in the middle, you can see our crews inspecting our equipment to identify any potential issues for maintenance and repair. We actually are using drones now so that we can actually get a full view and much more expeditiously with a lot more detail of the condition of our equipment from not just the bottom, if you will, but from the top and the sides. On the top right of this particular slide, you can see that we are also inspecting and trimming and in some cases removing vegetation and trees to prevent them from coming into contact with our equipment. We do maintain safe distances around our power lines and poles beyond compliance requirements, in fact, in our high fire risk areas. On the left, we also have our network of weather stations and higher definition wildfire cameras to monitor location-specific real-time conditions that help us inform our operational decision-making, such as PSPS de-energizations. In fact, access to the weather station data and the live camera feeds are actually publicly available online, and they are available as links in the appendix of this particular presentation, which will be forwarded to you later on. We also provide custom resources such as our community resource centers and community crew vehicles during PSPS events within the communities that we are expecting potential PSPS activity. We also offer backup battery and generator programs and rebates. These are some of the ways we are helping reduce the risk of wildfires, but also mitigate the impacts of PSPS in our communities. Next slide, please. So installing insulated wire or covered conductor not only reduces the risk of ignition from flying objects, but it also helps us raise the wind threshold that we use for making PSPS deionization decisions during those windy and dry conditions, meaning it can also help reduce the scope, the frequency, and duration of future PSPS events. Let's take a look at this video, please. Play the video. I think we're going to try to replay it if the video is doesn't have the sound. Can we replay, team?
To access structures and heavy terrain.
Thank you.
We're out here today using helicopters to access structures and heavy terrain and heavy vegetation. We're utilizing HEC, human external cargo, in order to access these structures. And we're doing a complete circuit rebuild. New composite poles, composite arms, and covered conductor installation up to about just shy of 6,000 feet elevation change. By installing covered conductor, we're eliminating any potential ignition sources from our infrastructure. If the grid goes out and the power's not moving, you can't pump gas. Grocery stores aren't going to keep their stuff going. You can't pull out money. You can't do anything without the power that these guys are maintaining. I think that's where a lot of purpose can come from in line work.
Great, thank you. So as you saw from the video, our crews are committed and are working hard to make our lines more resilient throughout our high fire risk area. Insulated wire has been a valuable tool, especially within the unique geography and terrain specific to the areas we serve throughout Southern California. Insulated wire is extremely effective in mitigating ignition risk, such as animals or objects like flying debris, as I indicated earlier, that come into contact with our power lines during these windy conditions. There are, in fact, 71% fewer faults or interruptions on our lines that could lead to ignitions on circuits that are fully covered with insulated wire compared to bare wire circuits. Also, we can deploy insulated wire at a faster pace, especially compared to undergrounding, in terms of helping us reduce wildfire risk more quickly and for more communities faster. In terms of cost, insulated wire costs up to 90% less than undergrounding, or at $600,000 per mile, whereas undergrounding can cost up to $5.5 million per mile. And these are costs that our customers are paying for, so there are considerations in how we make these decisions. As of the end of March, we've installed more than 3,200 miles of insulated wire. That's nearly double what was covered at the same time last year. We are also considering several hundred miles for undergrounding in certain areas that can benefit from additional risk reduction that undergrounding provides, such as areas that have limited exit routes and wind speeds that exceed the PSPS thresholds for insulated wire. For prospective locations for undergrounding, we will examine its feasibility, taking into account total risk mitigation, time it will take to execute, and therefore reduce the risk, as well as cost, constructability, and permitting. Next slide, please. Through our grid hardening work, annual equipment inspections and vegetation management programs, our targeted PSPS programs as well, along with a suite of other activities SCE undertook, we estimate that the risk of damage from catastrophic wildfire was reduced by 65 to 70% relative to pre-2018 levels. Year over year, the total number of acres burned from wildfires associated with SCE equipment decreased from 128,000 acres in 2020 to less than 500 acres in 21. This was despite the multi-year drought and extreme wind conditions experienced last year. This improvement, though, could not have occurred without the partnership and dedicated efforts of many leaders throughout the state. We also reached a significant milestone recently in having about a third of our overhead distribution lines in high fire risk areas replaced with insulated wire. We do continue to drive this program forward and expect to have covered about 40% of our distribution lines, or about 4,000 out of the 10,000 miles in our high fire risk areas by the end of this year. I would like to highlight some of our achievements with our 2021 PSPS action plan. With the accelerated grid hardening work we completed last year, and based on 2021 weather and fuel conditions, there was a 73% reduction in PSPS outage time on circuits that were frequently impacted by PSPS. We also removed 81,000 customers from PSPS scope through our exceptions and switching protocols, and we also had 64 community resource centers available to support customers during these difficult PSPS events. We will delve into the county-specific improvements later in this presentation. Last year, we also expanded our aerial suppression support by partnering with Orange, LA, and Ventura County fire agencies. We contributed $18 million for the creation of a quick reaction force of helitankers that can drop water and fire retardant not only during the day, but also at nighttime. It was used, in fact, on about 50 fires in 2021, helping to suppress fires early before they could become bigger fires. Next slide, please. So we did implement public safety power shutoffs to reduce, public safety power shutoff, PSPS, to reduce wildfire risk. And we do understand the significant impact that PSPS has on our communities, on all of you, especially during these past 2 years during this pandemic. That is why we use PSPS as a tool of last resort to protect public safety under dangerous fire weather conditions. As an illustration, the photo on the left does show the damage or the hazards of a heavy tree branch that fell into our lines after strong winds during a PSPS event. Had the lines not been de-energized, there was the potential for a spark. However, we do again recognize how inconvenient and disruptive outages can be, and we are continuing to learn from past events and take feedback received to make improvements to ultimately further reduce the frequency, scope, and duration of PSPS activities. And now I'll turn it over to Cameron to share more about PSPS and our grid hardening efforts, and specifically in the Riverside County. Cameron?
Thank you, Paul. Good evening, everybody. My name is Cameron McPherson, and I lead the team responsible for carefully evaluating the circuits across our service territory that have been impacted by PSPS, developing plans to mitigate those events, and then helping shepherd those projects through to completion. It's my pleasure to be here with you all tonight. On to slide 13. Great. This slide covers the primary activities we undertake in order to reduce the need for PSPS. But before we get into the details specific to Riverside County, I'd like to bring attention to the tremendous amount of hardening work that was completed last year across our territory, in addition to our plans for 2022. We installed over 1,500 miles of cover conductor last year, 700 of which were directly attributable to our expedited grid hardening plans to reduce PSPS. We have plans for another 1,100 miles of cover conductor in 2022, 270 of which have been identified and expedited to reduce PSPS. We installed 23 remote controlled switches last year, which helps us be more surgical in our application of PSPS in more highly impacted areas, and have plans for at least 15 switches this year. We also improved the fidelity of our weather forecasting capabilities last year, adding over 400 weather stations, with plans to install another 150 in 2022. Through careful attention to the ways our circuits are designed and the flexibility that our switching devices afford us, and analyzing the wildfire risks present on a segment by segment basis, we were able to remove over 81,000 customers from PSPS consideration last year. Lastly, on a dynamic basis throughout the year and leading up to an event, our PSPS teams are always looking for changes to fuels, vegetation, or urban development, among other things, to more accurately assess where the risks remain high and where PSPS may or may not be needed. Next slide. So this slide gives some statistics on PSPS events and how we did last year compared with 2020, both across the service territory and specific to Riverside County. Across the service territory, we had a 76% decrease in customers that were interrupted due to PSPS and 79% fewer circuits interrupted, which resulted in 73% decrease in customer minutes of interruption. Specific to Riverside County, we had a 63% decrease in customers interrupted due to PSPS and 63% fewer circuits interrupted, resulting in a 54% decrease in customer minutes of interruption. Next slide. On this slide, we have a bit more detail about the expedited grid hardening work performed in 2021 and plans for 22. Through our efforts targeted to Riverside County, we expedited the completion of 80 miles of covered conductor. We also installed 6 additional switches to bolster our switching capabilities and installed 2 additional weather stations to increase the granularity of our weather forecasting. Together with the additional covered conductor, we were able to raise PSPS wind thresholds on 3 circuits. In 2022, we're ramping our expedited grid hardening in Riverside County, expediting 127 miles of covered conductor in this year, with plans to install at least 1 switch and at least 9 additional weather stations. We're also looking to remove at least 1 circuit from PSPS consideration and have plans to raise PSPS thresholds on at least 5 additional circuits. Next slide. For a geographical representation of where we have completed grid hardening versus our plans for 2022, here's an overview map of circuits across the county that have either already been hardened, these are represented with the black lines, and nearly a few dozen circuits represented in various colors that we plan to harden in 2022. Next slide. So in keeping with the geographical theme, this slide represents a deeper dive on one of the 22 circuits that we are planning to harden in 22. To give you an idea of how we approach individual circuit mitigations. So the Bing 12 kV or kilovolt line, that circuit that serves a mix of light industrial, commercial, and residential customers on the south end of the circuit that backs up to the hills around Lambs Canyon, and then some residential to the northwest where the circuit runs along Noble Creek open area. So the plan is to install covered conductor on the poles that run into some of these high fire risk areas, and then of course raise wind speed thresholds. With these new covered conductor sections, we expect to completely mitigate PSPS for this circuit compared to the same weather patterns in 2020 or 2021. Next slide. So now that you've heard a little bit more about our robust hardening plans for 2022 in Riverside County, our expectations for improvement are higher as well. This chart shows the circuits we plan to harden, with the gray bars indicating actual PSPS customer minutes of interruption, or CMI, from 2020 and 2021, and those estimated CMI based on those same weather conditions after hardening, represented in yellow. For those circuits that are not showing data, those are weather stations, and the benefits should shape up this year as we begin to gather the data on those new weather stations, which we hope will help us perform some additional switching to isolate the segments more frequently impacted by high winds and isolate those that don't. For those that have a gray bar and no yellow bar, we estimate our proposed improvements will reduce PSPS by 100%. Assuming the same weather conditions as 2020 or 21, and upon successful completion of these grid hardening measures, we expect to see an 82% reduction in customer minutes of interruption due to PSPS in Riverside County. Thank you. And now I'll hand it back off to Katie.
Good evening, everyone. Just like the other speakers that have been here today, I really wanted to start by thanking you for taking the time in your busy evenings and to join us for this informational meeting. I also want to acknowledge that we understand how disruptive PSPS events can be. And what I'm going to share today are best practices for how you can prepare for PSPS events and what we are doing to support our customers. On this first slide, we'll be talking about the communications that we have for our customers and a new outage map that we have. If SCE determines that a PSPS event is necessary as a last resort due to emerging dangerous weather conditions, we notify our public safety partners, local and tribal governments 72 hours in advance so that they can prepare. We then notify our customers by 48 hours in advance. SCE provides notifications in multiple languages and various methods that the customers can choose to better ensure that all customers are receiving notifications. Customers can choose to receive these notifications through email, text, or a voice call. For anyone that does not have an SCE account but would also like to stay informed, you can choose to sign up for what we call address level alerts to receive alerts about a specific address. We've heard concerns from our customers regarding PSPS notifications, and we are currently working to improve them by making them more transparent and clear for our customers. We are also in discussions with the county offices of emergency management to explore the use of emergency radio broadcast for areas with poor cell service. Before, during, and after events, customers will receive alerts to keep them informed along the way. So it is very important to sign up to receive these alerts if you have not already. The link to sign up will be provided at the end of the presentation. In addition to alerts, we have a dedicated PSPS webpage on SCE.com, which you can see here on the slide. You can receive helpful information here, such as fire weather and a map where you can enter your address to receive outage status information, such as if a location is under consideration, de-energized, or not impacted by PSPS. The map will also provide the nearest location of an SCE Community Resource Center, which I will speak about more on our next slide. If we could go to the next slide, please. Here we'll be talking about our various customer programs and resources. As mentioned in this slide, we have 3 different areas that you can see. First, we offer rebates and programs to help prepare for resiliency and services during outages. For customers who rely on electrically powered medical devices, we offer fully subsidized critical care battery backup program. This program provides a free portable backup battery and solar charging panel to customers enrolled in our medical baseline program, residing in a high fire risk area and enrolled in either California Alternate Rates for Energy, CARE, or Family Electric Rate Assistance, FARA. To check if you reside in a high fire risk area, you can go to the California Public Utilities Commission website, and a link will be provided at the end of the presentation. We are currently reaching out to all eligible income qualified customers to make them aware of this program. We also have rebate programs to help offset the cost of investing in resiliency for your home. We offer a $75 rebate for a portable battery to power devices such as your modem or router, charging your cell phone, laptop, tablet, and even some larger appliances such as refrigerators. For portable generators, we offer a $200 rebate to help lower the initial cost of the generator and a $500 rebate for income qualified customers that are enrolled in the programs I mentioned earlier, CARE, FARA, and Medical Baseline, and that are also in a high fire risk area. For customers who are looking for a whole house battery system, SCE's Self-Gen Incentive Program has been enhanced with higher incentives and a 50% upfront payment for qualifying customers who reside in a Tier 2 or 3 high fire risk area or have experienced 2 or more PSPS events and meet additional qualifications such as income or have a dependency on electrically powered medical devices. To explore the batteries and generators available for rebates, you can visit SCE's online marketplace. A link is also available at the end of this presentation, along with a link on more information about the Self-Generation Incentive Program. For local care during a PSPS outage, we activate community resource centers in or near impacted communities by partnering with local community groups. And we also have the option of deploying our community crew vehicles to locations where a community resource center might not be available. On-site services provided by trained SCE staff, including providing resiliency kits, which include small items such as a solar-powered phone charger, personal protective equipment, such as gloves and hand sanitizers, a voucher to get ice, along with light snacks and water. We also provide information about the PSPS event and customer programs and assistance, with signing up for notifications, and depending on social distancing safety, we provide on-site mobile phone charging. At certain locations, firewood, blankets, and bulk water are provided as needed. We also offer hotel discounts from participating hotels where we've negotiated 5 to 25% discounts for impacted customers, depending on the hotel. During events, we post the locations of activated community resource centers and community crew vehicles, and we also communicate those locations with our public safety partners and online through social media. For community safety, we have installed or are in the process of installing resiliency backup power solutions in 7 communities: Agua Dulce, Cabazon, Lee Vining, Mammoth Lakes, and Bridgeport, with work in Bridgeport to be completed by the end of Q2 this year. We will also provide a backup generator to a customer with their own switching equipment in Stallion Springs. These resiliency zones are intended to provide temporary backup power to help essential services stay energized, such as gas stations, markets, police, or fire stations. Overall, our customer care programs are aimed at minimizing the impact of PSPS as much as possible for our customers. Next slide, please. So here are some actions that you can take to be prepared. We have 3 different categories: learning more, signing up, and being prepared. We have a webpage, sce.com/wildfire, that has all the information and resources related to wildfire and PSPS so that you can be prepared. If you have questions, you can contact us by email, social media, or by phone. You will be getting a survey after this meeting. Please provide feedback, which will help us shape the services and support we provide going forward. You will also have the opportunity to ask questions that we weren't able to get to this evening. As I mentioned earlier, please sign up or verify that you are signed up for PSPS alerts and update your contact information if needed. Please also review all of the programs and services that SCE provides, especially if you are dependent on electrically powered medical equipment. You may be eligible for SCE's Medical Baseline Program, which includes discounts off of your bill, and the Critical Care Battery Backup Program that we discussed. Additional rebates and incentives are also available on our website. An emergency can happen at any time. You can help your family be prepared with a safety preparedness plan, some basic supplies, and advanced planning. Whether a pandemic, an earthquake, or a wildfire, preparedness will help everyone cope better and stay safer. This concludes the formal presentation, and with that, I will turn it over to Jeremy to start the Q&A. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Katie. Just a reminder to submit a question, use the Q&A window throughout the session. So we have a question about what is the relative humidity and wind speeds needed to enact a PSPS? I think, Paul, you're going to go ahead and take this one.
Yes, I will, Jeremy. Thank you, Mike, for the question. It's a great question. Unfortunately, it's not a simple answer. There's actually a number of factors that we look at, and weather is certainly a big part of it. And weather does include, in our case, wind speed, such as gusts, as well as sustained winds. So we look at that. We also look at dew point depression, which is another measure of relative humidity. But we also importantly look at fuel, the fuel condition, the vegetation that is. And so we look at live fuel moisture, dead fuel moisture. We look at the state of the curing of the grasses, in addition to the amount of fuel on the ground, right? The amount of vegetation on the ground. So it's a combination of all these factors that are considered, and we forecast that out 5 days out continuously, and we update it twice a day. And we have windows for each of our circuits with three-hour increments. So we actually have some pretty granular data. And as we get closer to the date, we actually have more accurate information. But it's the combination of those things, in addition to whether or not we have bare wire or if we have insulated wire, that actually drives whether or not we end up deciding to de-energize a section of that circuit. So hopefully that's helpful. Thanks for the question, Mike, again.
Great. Thanks a lot, Paul. And it looks like Mark Bassett from Riverside County is back on. Mark, want to go ahead and kind of walk through some of those emergency preparedness tips that you were going over before you were cut off?
Yeah, so I'm not sure where I ended up, but I'll start at that point. So let me get to that. So I'm going to go ahead and start with having a plan. Again, we're asking that the best thing you can do for you and your family is develop a family communications plan, and always keep that with you. Keep it in your wallet, keep it in your purse. Develop a checklist of crucial items that you would like to take if you were evacuated. It's always good to have that. That way you can attend to getting those items quickly. And then having a location that your family has identified that is safe and for everyone to meet should anyone get evacuated or individuals are still at work and they're coming home, you have that central meeting place. Again, make an emergency preparedness kit is very important. We look at 3 days as the best, start. However, it could go longer than that. So, anything you can do, but 3 days is sufficient. You should have something like a first aid kit, food with a daily calorie intake of 2,100 calories, and with the essential nutrients. Canned goods, where you will have a half a pound per person, water, a gallon per person per day, and half of that to drink and half to use for cooking and sanitation. Blankets, flashlights with batteries, radio with batteries, or one of the crank radios would be sufficient. Prescription medication is always important if you can get enough and then rotate that through, and then having an extra pair of glasses. Some of the emergency preparedness websites that you can go to, of course, the American Red Cross has a lot of great information. Riverside County Emergency Preparedness website would be the Alert Riverside County, www.rivcoready.org/alertrivco. SCE, of course, has theirs for their emergency preparedness, and that's at www.sce.com/be prepared. And then CAL FIRE with their wildfire preparedness tips at www.readyforwildfire.org. Hopefully that helps.
That does. Thanks again, Mark. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. Just want to remind all the attendees to please add any questions into the Q&A section. I do see some hands raised, so please go ahead and just type your questions into the Q&A. Definitely have some time for some questions, so please go ahead and put them in there. Just give that a moment or so. I do see some hands raised, but if you could just go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A section.
And Jeremy, I'll just jump in and clarify for folks that something I learned is that there's the chat function and the Q&A function. So if folks are trying to put it into chat, that won't work. If you look at the top of your Teams there's an icon that says Q&A with some comment bubbles, and that's where you can go to type in your Q&A.
Thanks, Katie. All right, just a reminder, just please go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A section. While we have you, it looks like we have a potential question coming. Just give us a few seconds. Remind everyone to take a look at sce.com/outage. Lots of great information there as well. We also have an email address that was provided as well. So if you have any other questions or like some additional information, please send us an email. We'll definitely get back to you for follow-up. Okay, here's a question. How does SCE define same weather conditions when evaluating year-over-year changes? That'd be for Paul or Cameron.
Yeah, I think I can take that. So I'm trying to remember the reference that we made in which slide, but I know we've used that reference before, and this is when we, as we harden our system, using insulated wire or using the composite poles or the composite cross arms or the sectionalizing devices and the fast fuses that we have been deploying. We then run a model of the same wind conditions that we experienced when we had PSPS. So say that we made the upgrades in 2021, and then we go back and look at if we had the same weather as we had in 2020, and we de-energized 15 times on that circuit. I'm just making a number up, and we impacted 15,000 customers. If we now apply these new upgrades or this hardening that we've put into that section of the circuit, and we had those same weather conditions, would we have de-energized at the same frequency and the same number of customers? And that's so when we reference the reduction in outage time or the reduction in number of customers that were impacted, it's using that reference. Hopefully that makes sense.
Great, thanks, Paul. I have another question about switching the remote switches. Are they remote? Cameron, you want to touch a little bit about some of those efforts?
Yeah, I'm trying to interpret the question as an air. If it's we do have different kinds of switches. So if we're talking about switching devices, if it's a true air switches are typically pole switches or hand operated switches. But the devices that I'm talking about, which are remotely controlled devices, are not air switches. If you're talking about sparks, they're all contained within a vacuum inside the device. I hope that answers the question.
Gotcha. Thank you, Cameron. Also, another question about the tier 1 and tier 2 high fire areas. Will that be Paul probably or Cameron?
I can grab that one too. If I heard tier 1 or tier 2, if we're talking, I'm not sure exactly which slide, but if we're talking about tier 2 or tier 3, that refers to the CPUC's high fire threat district. And that's what they consider elevated and extreme risk for wildfire. Tier 2 being elevated risk and tier 3 being the highest risk for extreme risk.
Gotcha.
And I can maybe add to that. And tier 1 is the lowest tier. It's not considered the high fire risk areas that Cameron just described, but it is on the lower zone. So it is not It is still considered a high fire risk area, I believe, but it's not one of the highest risk areas. And I can't remember the term that we used.
You reminded me, Paul. It's
Yeah.
it's tier 1, zone 1, high hazard zone, which represents tree mortality zones.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for reminding me.
No worries.
Thank you. Appreciate the question.
Great. Yeah, thanks for the question. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please go ahead and place those in the Q&A section of the Teams chat. Doesn't look like we have any additional ones. If you have any follow-up questions or feedback, please send us an email that was included in the registration link, and we'll get back to you in the coming days. So in closing, thank you everyone for your participation tonight. As mentioned earlier, you'll be receiving a survey to provide us feedback. In addition, this meeting's been recorded. We will post a recording on our website in a few days at se.com/wildfire, along with other information and resources. Thank you all again for joining, and have a wonderful evening. Okay, it looks like there might be one more question. Take a look at that. Let's see if it comes through. All right, so there's a question. What is a high fire risk area consist of? Cameron or Paul, you want to take that?
I can take
believe
that.
That's a PUC or state name.
Yeah, I can take that. They're referring to the tier 2 or tier 3 that we just talked about. High fire threat district that the CPUC map dictates, which is high fire risk area for Edison. That's just it's a map that identifies areas that are at an elevated or extreme risk for fire potential in the utility context. There's a lot of inputs that goes into it. The primary driver is fuels. What is the volume of fuels, the type of fuels is considered. The presence of electrical assets is considered. There's wind components, prevailing wind components to it. There's also, I think, more complex fire behavior like flame length and rate of spread that play into it. So those are some of the factors that play into the what's considered a high fire risk area. Oh, and there's some aspects of suppression as well, where accessibility and suppression resources available depending on accessibility. I think those are some of the main factors that played into the original creation of the high fire threat district map.
Thank you, Cameron. Any other questions? All right, well, again, thank you again for taking time to join us this evening. We'll go ahead and post the recording at se.com/wildfire in the coming days. If you have any additional questions, please go ahead and send us an email. Okay, looks like we have one more question. Apologies. Wait. Question is, I live in a Nuevo, and 4 times my power was off last summer. I know, Cameron, are you able to touch at all on some of the grid hardening activities in Nuevo, Lakeview Nuevo area?
Not off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Okay.
That's really circuit specific information that we could probably get back to them if we had some more specifics.
Sounds good. Yeah. Why don't we take down the contact info and we'll send a follow-up email.
Perfect.
Thank you again for joining.